Hi, everyone. So, when we last stopped reading, we were talking about Felix, and he's finally at that Blenheim school, even though his mom lied to get him in there. And he's working with that girl, Winnie, who speaks like perfect French in this French immersion program. He did say in the last chapter that he vowed to never ever work with her again after she was so annoying that the first time they worked together. But he did end the chapter by saying that he made that vow on a Friday, but he broke it the following Monday. So let's see what's up with that. The school newspaper is looking for volunteers to write a few pages of the September edition in French, Monsieur Thibault announced on Monday at the beginning of our third week. It's published once a month. There's no extra credit, but it's a great way to work on your language skills. Anyone who's interested will have our first meeting after school in room 222. I think we should try it out, Dylan said later in the cafeteria. He was eating a ham sandwich. His braces caught a lot of it, enough for an afternoon snack. Me too, I replied. Remember that magazine we wrote when we were kids? Stories from Your Anus? You wrote an article called Aliens Probed Me. You wrote an article called Martian Steals All Families' Underpants. We started cracking up. Dylan sprayed a little bit of his sandwich on me in the process, but I didn't mind. What's a bit of masticated food between friends? Ew. After school, we made our way to room 222. Monsieur Thibault was there with the editor of the paper, an 8th grader who introduced himself as Charlie Twain. Looks like you two are the only ones coming, said Monsieur Thibault. So I guess we'll get started early. Thanks for being here, Charlie began, just as the door opened and a latecomer arrived. Winnie. She looked flustered. Her red beret was askew. Sorry I'm late, she said. Donald thought it would be funny to steal my beret and use it as a frisbee. Donald was a kid in our class, and he seemed like kind of a jerk. Winnie took the seat in front of me as Charlie continued. We want a French component to the paper, mostly for your guys in immersion, but also for the rest of the students who are doing regular French and want to practice their language skills too. You can write about pretty much anything. We just need enough content to fill 3 pages. Winnie raised her hand. Yes, said Charlie. That won't be a problem, not for me anyway. Her red lips curled into a tiny smug grin. Dylan and I looked at each other and fake barfed. Okay, well, there's a crunch for the first issue, so if you could have the stuff to me by Monday, the 13th, Winnie raised her hand again. Yes? I'm assuming you want hard-hitting stories about politics, poverty, drugs? Well, it is a school newspaper, Winnie. It's meant to be pretty light and entertaining. Winnie's hand shot up again. You really don't need to keep raising your hand. In other words, you want fluff, she said. Her lips pursed in disapproval. Monsieur Thibault inhaled deeply. He exhaled slowly. Hey, write whatever you want, said Charlie. I don't care. Just need it by the 13th. Meeting adjourned. Charlie and Monsieur Thibault hightailed it out of the room. Let's go to my house, Dylan said to me as we stood up. Keep noodling ideas. Winnie looked at us. Excellent plan, she said. Dylan and I shot each other a look that said crap. Winnie must have seen because her bottom lip started trembling. Oh, I get it. You didn't mean me. There was a long pause. You can come too if you want, said Dylan with zero enthusiasm. This was where Winnie was supposed to grab a clue and say, no, it's okay, but instead her face lit up. Goody, I'll go get my satchel. She hurried out of the room. I looked at Dylan. Goody? Satchel? It was going to be a long afternoon. Winnie was just as annoying as we expected her to be, possibly more so. First, there was her expression when she entered Dylan's house. Her perfect red mouth had become a little O of horror. She tried to cover. It's so charmant. She refused our offer of pizza pops and chips. Empty calories, she said. Also, I could tell you all the reasons you should eat less meat for the sake of the planet. Please don't, said Dylan. In the living room, she spread her jacket on the couch before she sat down. The couch was covered in cat hair, but still. So, should we just toss out ideas? Asked Dylan. Winnie took out a leather-bound notebook and a pen. I'll keep the minutes. I'll keep the hours, I said, chomping on a pizza pop. I'll keep the seconds, said Dylan, shoveling chips into his mouth. 2 out of the 3 of us cracked up. I could do a crossword, I said, and maybe an article on fun French facts, like stuff the French invented or moments in history. Great idea, said Dylan. Where's the edge? Where's the journalistic rigor? Winnie tapped her pencil to her notebook. Hey, I know, said Dylan, ignoring her. I could write about poltergeists, which are ghosts, like we talked about last time we read this. Perfect, I said. Winnie wrinkled her nose. Why would you do that? Because they're cool and interesting, said Dylan, and because we have one living here. Pfft, please, poltergeists don't exist. How do you know? I asked, feeling defensive on Dylan's behalf. I had my own theories about Bernard, but I knew to keep them to myself. Because any thinking person knows that ghosts aren't real. Dylan started to make sputtering sounds. I pointed at the cross at her neck. Do you believe in God? I do, she said. How is that any different? Asked Dylan. Have you seen God before? Have you seen your poltergeist? She replied. No, but I've seen proof. He plays a ton of practical jokes, but he also looks out for us. Like the other day, my sister slipped on the stairs, and this invisible force kept her from falling. Winnie opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. Fine. I can tell there's no use arguing with you two. Do your weird pseudo-journalism. I'm going to write an investigative piece about asbestos. That's like mold. Our school was built a long time ago, meaning there's probably asbestos in the walls. Dylan looked at me. Sounds super, he said. Super boring, I added. Again, 2 out of the 3 of us cracked up. So obviously it's Felix and Dylan that are cracking up and not Winnie. Next chapter. As September drew to a close, it got colder, especially at night. This is something you become acutely aware of when you live in a van. But we adapted. As Astrid likes to say, living in a Westphalia definitely makes a person more resourceful. Resourceful, Felix, is a good life skill to have. And we are nothing if not resourceful. Take Wi-Fi, for example. When we need it, we go to a coffee shop or find an unsecured network. When something needs recharging, like a phone or batteries for our headlamps, we plug in somewhere like the laundromat. Sometimes we plug in at a power source outside an empty house. On the west side of Vancouver, there are a lot of big brand new houses with no one living in them. Astrid said they're investment properties. It's one of her pet peeves. Our city is becoming a playground for the rich, she said. Enormous empty homes when so many people who live here can't afford housing. Our politicians should be ashamed of themselves, she says, over and over and over and over. Astrid is very good at picking out which houses are people-free. All the blinds are drawn, check. Lights go on at the same time every night, check. Junk mail piles up, check. Sprinkler system on even if it's pouring rain with zero consideration for water conservation, check. It's surprisingly easy to pull up outside of one of these houses as darkness falls and use their electricity. We fill up our water containers with their outdoor hoses at the same time. We've never broken in unless you count... I'm getting ahead of myself. We are also resourceful when it comes to food. A Westphalia kitchen is pint-sized. The tiny 2-burner stovetop doesn't allow for elaborate meals, and we can't keep much stuff in this teensy fridge, so we eat a lot of stuff from cans. Habitat pea soup, vegetarian chili. My mom even lets me eat Chef Boyardee once in a while, even though she says it's toxic waste. But to be clear, I'm not malnourished. Not too badly anyway. I don't think I'm suffering from scurvy or a vitamin deficiency or anything like that. We shop at the No Frills where you can get really good deals on produce that they're about to throw out. And once in a while, my mom will... But I'm getting ahead of myself again. So remember, he's at the police station right now, kind of remembering all these things happening. So he keeps saying, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hang on. Because we don't really know what's going on or what's happening. So I'm very interested to find out. I won't lie. Some aspects of life in Westphalia never get easier. Like not having a bathroom. I miss that more than anything. We always try to stop for the night near a public restroom. We do our business in coffee shops or McDonald's restaurants, which have nice facilities. We do a lot of armpit and bit washing in sinks. Twice a week we go to a community center and have long showers. We do our best, but still, what I wouldn't give for a toilet to call my own. There is also a lack of privacy. 2 people in a small space like that, I dare anyone to try it and not get on their nerves once in a while. It doesn't help that my mom snores like a trucker sometimes, even though she totally denies it. And let's say that there are certain things an almost 13-year-old would occasionally like to do, private and personal things, that are impossible when the almost 13-year-old's mother is sleeping 3 feet away. That's all I'll say about that. But in September, we were sure our living arrangement was temporary, so I managed. My mom moved to Westphalia every few nights so we wouldn't arouse suspicion. I secured Mel to the dashboard. Mel, if you don't remember, is that little gnome that his grandmother gave him before she died. I lost my spot. To the dashboard so he could watch over us. On the days we couldn't shower at the community center, I headed to school early and locked myself in the handicap washroom, which was private and spacious. I kept a small toiletry kit in my locker with soap and deodorant, a spare toothbrush, and toothpaste. I'd peel off my shirt and give my armpits a good thorough wash. I'd scrub my face and brush my teeth and comb out my hair. Every time I was at Dylan's house, I would make sure to use his toilet to do a number 2. I told myself it wasn't gross. I told myself it was resourceful. And then came the day that I told Dylan and Winnie my first no one gets hurt. That's that type of lie that no one gets hurt. It was Friday and our articles were due on Monday, so we agreed to get together on the weekend to do final edits. We can't go to my place, Dylan said. A bunch of our relatives are visiting from back east. He looked at me. Could we go to yours? I live pretty far. That's okay, said Winnie. We can take the bus. I opened and closed my mouth. Then I heard myself say, my mom's got the flu. She's vomiting. Diarrhea, the works. Winnie's mouth formed that little O of horror. Well, then, you can come to my house. She gave me a stern look, but if you're contagious, I'll murder you. Dylan and I took the bus together to Winnie's place on Saturday. It was in a brand new 8-story building at First Street and 7th Avenue. She buzzed us up. Take off your shoes, she whispered as she opened the door. She guided us down a narrow hallway into a small living room. It looked like something in an IKEA catalog, only not as tidy. Sliding glass doors led to a balcony with views over the ocean and the North Shore Mountains. A pretty jade bird sat on a mantel above a gas fireplace. Have a seat, she whispered again. Is there a reason we're whispering? I asked in a whisper, taking half of the love seat while Dylan took the other half. My mom's sleeping. She's an obstetrician. She delivered 2 babies last night, Winnie said with pride. Dad's a nurse. They met during a C-section 15 years ago. Dad helped Mom pull the baby out. Pretty romantic, don't you think? Dylan made a face. Pretty gross. We went through our pieces one last time, arguing in whispers. Your articles are silly, Winnie said. Your article is a snore fest. She ignored our comments and we ignored hers, but we did let her correct our spelling and grammatical errors because there were loads of them. Mr. Wu came in as we were finishing up. He was tall and skinny and had a friendly smile. His arms weighed down with bags of groceries. Would your friends like some lunch? He asked, also in a whisper. I just got back from the T&T supermarket. My stomach growled loudly in response. Astrid and I had eaten day-old donuts from her coffee shop for breakfast, but that was hours ago. Winnie jumped up. I can make sandwiches with my homemade bread, she said. 10 minutes later, the 4 of us were crowded into the tiny kitchen, which was still 20 times bigger than the Westphalia's kitchen. Winnie served us cheese sandwiches. You really made the bread? I asked. It looked delicious. She nodded. I started last year after I read an article about all the preservatives in store-bought bread. This one's gluten-free with quinoa and chia seeds. I took a big bite and started to chew. It took all my willpower not to spit it out. The bread tasted like sawdust and had the consistency of tree bark. I could tell from Dylan's face that he was struggling too. Winnie held out a plate to her dad. You sure you won't have one? Mr. Wu patted his stomach. Wish I could. Still stuff from a late breakfast. Honey, do you mind getting my water glass? I left it in the other room. The moment she was gone, he motioned to us. Quick, take out the cheese and hand me the bread. We did as we were told. We wolfed down the cheese while he slipped the bread into the garbage, making sure to put other items on top of it. When Winnie returned, he told her a give peace a chance. Your friends are bottomless pits. I'm making them lunch number 2. He started pulling stuff out of his grocery bags. Steamed pork buns, anyone? Bah, what have I said about pork? Winnie chastised. Once in a while, I need my fix, he said. I ate 4 of them. They were legit delicious. Mr. Wu seemed like a very good dad. Before Dylan and I left, I used the bathroom. It was white and clean and smelled like lavender poopery. You know that like spray after you use the bathroom. They even had a heated toilet seat. I sat there for a long time, feeling the warmth radiate through my bum, and suddenly, out of nowhere, tears pricked my eyes. I longed for a toilet, and I longed for my dad. The first edition of the Blenheim Bugle came out on Wednesday. Monsieur Thibault gave us time to read it before lunch. It was 8 pages with the 3 French pages at the end. My article was featured first. I'll try to translate from memory. It went something like this. Fun French Facts Part 1 by Felix Knudsen. The French invented many things, the Braille system, pasteurization, hot air balloons, but I'm going to tell you about a bloodier invention, the guillotine. It was made by a doctor named Joseph Ignace Guillotine in the late 1700s. He was against capital punishment. He made the guillotine because it was a nicer way to execute someone than with a sword or an axe. A guillotine is that thing that you poke your head through, and it a thing comes down and chops your head off, that they used in medieval times to kill people. He was very sad when it was named after him. The guillotine chopped off tens of thousands of heads. Executions were big public events. People brought picnics and brought programs with them with the names of those who were about to be killed. The guillotine chopped off the heads of Louis XVI, I don't know what number that is off the top of my head, and Marie Antoinette at the end of the French Revolution. It was used for the last time in 1977. That was only 30 years ago. Oops. The next article was Dylan's. It was called Poltergeist, Fact or Fiction by Dylan Brinkerhoff. Poltergeist means noisy ghost in German. Poltergeists are different from regular ghosts because they can move things and even throw things. Some people think they mean harm, and maybe some of them do, but our poltergeist does not. That is right, we have a poltergeist. His name is Bernard. He is sometimes annoying, but I think he likes being a part of our family. I think he protects us in his own way. Dylan and I had to look up lots of words and keep the grammar simple because we didn't have a big French vocabulary yet. My simple crossword rounded out the second page. Winnie's article was last. Because it was so long, Charlie had made it single spaces to fit. Everything you need to know about asbestos and mesothelioma by Winnie Wu. Mesothelioma is a cancerous tumor that starts in the cells of the mesothelium. What is mesothelium, you ask? Well, it's the membrane that protects a lot of your internal organs. The one that protects our lungs is called the pleura. Actually, there are 2 layers, and the inner layer is called the visceral pleural, and the outer layer is called the partial pleura. Wow, that's really hard to say. Anyway, they are made up of cells. Those cells are called mesothelial cells, and sometimes they act up. They change and sometimes turn into cancerous cells. Why does that happen? Well, guess what? The culprit is often asbestos. Asbestos fibers are very fine, and when someone breathes them in, they can get in, you guessed it, in the mesothelium. The link between asbestos and mesothelioma has been known for years, and lots of people die from it. And even though it is now illegal in Canada, we still export it to other countries, which, in this reporter's opinion, is sick and wrong. But also, newsflash, it is still in the walls of many old buildings, and newsflash, that includes our very own school. Winnie's article went on and on from there with big words that no one but Monsieur Thibault could understand. When the bell rang for lunch, a bunch of kids came up to Dylan and told me that they had enjoyed our articles and had been able to follow them. One girl, Sophie, fell into a deep conversation with Dylan about the paranormal. Sometimes my grandma sits on my bed in the middle of the night, I heard her say, and she's been dead for 5 years. Ooh. No one said a word to Winnie except for Donald. Your article was amazing, he said as he walked by her desk. Amazingly stupid, he and his friend Vlad cracked up. Winnie's shoulders drooped. She scurried out of the room. Dylan and Sophie had moved on to the subject of Ouija boards, and I had told him that I'd see him in the cafeteria. Winnie was sitting at a table by herself, eating an egg and bean sprout sandwich. I felt a twinge of pity, so I sat down across from her. I thought your article was very informative, I said. To my utter horror, her eyes filled up with tears. Whoa, don't cry. Last year, I was diagnosed with dyscalculia. That's awful, I said. Is it terminal? She gave me a sharp look. What? No, dummy. It's like math dyslexia. I flunked out of Cumin. Cumin. That's like a math tutoring place. And the year before, I was asked to not sign up for ballet lessons because they thought I was too clumsy. She blew her nose into a Kleenex. You think I'm this totally perfect person. No, I don't. Not even close. But I'm not. There are so many things I'm lousy at, and I just thought journalism was my thing, you know? I thought this was one thing I was actually good at, aside from languages, I guess. Winnie, come on, it's just one article. One article on a very important subject, which nobody read, she sighed. Nobody wants to think anymore. No one wants to read anything that matters. Maybe you needed to hook them more. Like if the headline had been, "Is your school killing you?" And next time, maybe simplify. You dumped a whole bunch of big words on the reader. Even in English, it would have been hard to follow. She had stopped crying. In other words, you want me to pander to the lowest common denominator. Her voice was icy. The lowest what? She stood up and slapped her hands on the table. I refuse to be part of the dumbing down of North America, she yelled. Then she grabbed her gross sandwich and flounced away in her plaid skirt, and I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. After school, I didn't go to Dylan's place for once. Instead, I walked all the way to Bean There Donut That with a copy of the paper under my arm. That's where his mom works. Bells jingled over the door and I walked in. The walls were painted bright yellow, making it feel warm and inviting. Astrid gave me a wave. She was behind the counter making a fancy coffee for a customer. I put the paper down beside the machine. Is this what I think it is? She asked. I nodded, and she stopped what she was doing and started reading. After a moment, the customer cleared his throat. Astrid waved the paper in his direction. My kid's a published journalist, she said. Then she abandoned the coffee machine altogether and came around the counter to give me a hug. I'm so proud of you, Felix. It's excellent. The customer cleared his throat again, louder this time. Astrid rolled her eyes. Some people should learn to meditate, she said, loud enough for him to hear. She finished making his coffee. Once he'd left, muttered under his breath, it was just for the two of us. I'm going to make you a hot chocolate, she said, with extra whipped cream, because I have good news, too. My heart did a little flip in my chest. Is it about the place we saw? On Sunday, we had seen an apartment for rent, one that we both really liked. It was a garden suite, which was a fancy way of saying basement. But it was clean and had lots of windows, and it was close to the school. Yep, landlord called. Said it's ours if we want it. He just has to call my boss and get a reference. In a week, I'll be able to show him my pay stub. And since we're celebrating, Astrid let me eat Chef Boyardee for dinner when we got back to the van. We had day-old oat fudge bars from the coffee shop for dessert. Horatio loved the oats, so I fed him quite a bit. We were both giddy with the thought of having our own place again, and as we lay in our beds in the dark, we talked about what we looked forward to most. Having a bathtub, Astrid said. Having a toilet, I said. And also, no more lies, I thought. I didn't like lying to Dylan or to Winnie. Soon I could have a friend over any time I wanted. After I turned out my headlamp, I only made it halfway through listening all the Nobel Peace Prize winners in my head before I fell into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. I went to Dylan's house after school the next day, and by the time I got back to the van, it was close to 6 o'clock. Astrid usually didn't come home until at least 6:30, so I let myself in with a key. She was curled up on the back seat, her sleeping bag wrapped around her. Astrid? She didn't answer. I thought you were working till 6. I was supposed to, she said, her voice muffled through the sleeping bag. Oh no, my POO, or powers of observation, told me something was very wrong. What happened? My boss read all these lousy reviews about a new barista with a bad attitude online. I told him it wasn't my job to be nice to jerks. He said it was, and then he fired me. My skin felt clammy all of a sudden. What about the apartment? The landlord called the shop for a reference 5 minutes after I got fired. Oh, I said. I'm sorry, Felix. I really am. I crawled into the van and closed the door against the rain. I sat beside my mom and rubbed her back. Then I took Horatio out of his cage and held him close. His whiskers tickled my face. I glanced up and saw Mel on the dashboard. I could have sworn he was staring right at me. We would not be moving out of the van. Not yet. So we'll stop there. The next time we start reading, it'll be October.